goat. Take the goat across first, Reynardo thought. But it was too late.
He set up the Sky Ripper and let it warm up. He would bluff if he had to. Zenobia came out, flanked by a very daunting platoon of ravens. "You won't actually use that," she said in that annoying, "I know everything because I'm a cat and you know nothing because you're just a fox" voice she had. Or "I know the odds." Good, because there's a real chance you could destroy the universe. No, not the first time I use it. The odds are too low. What? No? Yeah, sure. The first time, the odds are practically nothing. They only go up if I use it a bunch more times. No, but that's not how odds work. Didn't you pay attention in class? Now surrender, or I'll use it. Just once, he said. Don't.
He felt sure the odds were with him. You have to go with his gut. That's what heroes do. "Fire," he said. "Please?" The Sky Ripper fired. With a tremendous whoosh, the Emperor's flagship went up in flames. It was awesome. Then he noticed
there was a hole in the air. A blackness, like a tear in a parchment. Wind was blowing into it, widening it. It grew larger and even larger. Crates fell upwards into it, and the world itself seemed bent, like the reflection on a curved mirror, as it poured into the ravenous hole. 1 in 128. What are the odds? Thought Reynardo, and then everything fell into the hole and was gone. And just like that, he was alive again, and back on the Farfarer, still fleeing burning Ubar. The book was still open before him. So, the book was a portal. It took you to the future, when your destinies would branch. He had failed and died 3 times, and he hadn't learned anything new this time. He'd done the same thing twice, yet expected a different outcome. But he was starting to feel like he was getting the hang of this. There was a way through to victory. He could feel it. He just had to keep running the path of Destinies. With that, the book fluttered back to the beginning, and he fell into it. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game-changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Sky Ripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis Stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Renato. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lupino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens? The island was windswept desert. No one went there except ostriches and ostrich hunters. The Iblis Stone. It sounded ominous. It sounded powerful. If the Emperor was searching for it, it must be dangerous. And so, Renato went ostrich hunting. Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away. Were all these things the Iblis Stone? Long hidden in a buried temple? Another ancient item that was only resurfacing now? Drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals? I need more materials, thought Renato. The air here tasted bitter. The steps were too tall for a person. The entire place felt restless, like it had been vexed to nightmare under the dust, waiting for its hour to come around at last. Ravens were already here, cawing in frustration. They were still searching for a way in. Good. Then he hadn't come too late.
isn't his fault. They look so breakable. Well, he'd always wanted to do that. This between us, if you don't mind. Wait, what? How was he outside? Hadn't he taken an elevator into the depths of the earth? Felt like Tarzan. Is a very cool sword, thought Renara. No, seriously. He couldn't feel his paw anymore. You couldn't go sticking jewels in your gauntlet just anywhere. What if you dropped one and broke it? Luckily, there was a bench right here. When I build my castle, thought Bernardo, all my gates are going to open with buttons, and all the levers will drop rocks at your head. It was all coming back to him. He wondered what he'd remember next. The Ravens at least could not get past this point. Obviously, the temple builders knew how to deal with tomb raiders. What did you do if one of these platforms stalled? It was a stone of the purest blackness. It reflected no light, like a void made solid. Nervous, he picked it up. I can make you mighty. Who said that? It was the stone. Eager, thirsty. That seemed tempting and terribly wrong. Zenobia was the Emperor's greatest general and a potent witch. But they had been close once, and Bernardo wasn't sure he really wanted to be Emperor. Why not capture the core of Sky Ripper instead? It was the eye of a lost god torn out by the transcendent Emperor to power his greatest weapon. "It's the core," said the stone anxiously.
The stone bothered him. He hated being told what to do. Wasn't that why he joined the rebellion? Wasn't that why he'd refused to be a soldier? He'd agreed to come on board only if he could freelance. The stone felt a bit clingy. The sage Calaveras had told him where to find the Sky Ripper, a weapon capable of challenging the gods. Even without its armature, the core would still possess great power. He would go there. The moment he landed the Farfarer, Reynardo had a rare feeling of regret. It's not too late, he thought. He could turn around and sail for Zenobia's island. He frowned. Wait a minute. He didn't want to kill Zenobia, did he? Sure, technically she was the enemy, but they'd been at Sword Fu school together. They'd never been lovers, but somehow they'd been closer. She'd told him every secret about herself. Except the biggest one. That she was the Emperor's daughter. No. Kill Zenobia, whispered the stone. Before it's too late.
This chest was filled with reprints of the entire Sandman series. Reprints? God, what was the point of collecting those? And there was something else. From the mystical East could make time itself slow for you. His sword fu teacher used to say power gems were cheating. Stupid old fart. Within your aerobics craze. Am I right? He wished there were more pylons he could use the hook on. They really needed to construct additional pylons.
The stone hadn't lied about what it could do for him. With each raven he cut down, he felt a jolt of power flowing into his arm. "You're weak," whispered the stone. "The core will kill you." "Are you afraid of it?" "No, don't be ridiculous," it chuckled. But it's unstable. It will poison you so much as carry it, and if you try to use it, it will explode catastrophically. Reynardo did not trust rocks that talked in his head. He went onwards.
The thing about puzzles was, once you solved one, you knew how to solve it again. Puzzles had no, what was the word? Replayability? Renato wondered if you could design a puzzle that would be different every time you played with it. Wouldn't that be fun?
This couldn't be good for global warming.
Around the room yelling, oh yeah, that's how we do it."
It was something he liked to do, but only after he'd killed all the witnesses. As he approached the core, the stone became hysterical. He had a sudden vision of plunging his gauntlet into the core and dying in anguish. That wasn't his vision, was it? The stone had sent him its darkest fears, hadn't it? He had a sudden impulse to do exactly that. He raised his right fist and plunged it into the core. There was a rush of light. He thought he could hear the stone screaming. And then he passed out. When Renato came to, the core was gone. But the Iblis stone was no longer black, but glowing with a blue light. And it was silent. "I can't hear you," he sang out, and "Yoo-hoo! It didn't answer. Ha, he said. He had defeated the demonic gem with the power of his mind. He felt invincible. It was time to attack the Imperial outpost on the Nexus. Take the battle to the enemy. But among the huge crystals, there was also an observatory. A wise man would probably ask the scientists exactly what he had first. How wise was he? As the Farfarer made its way toward the Nexus, Bernardo watched sparks fly out of the core. The Iblis stone sucked them in hungrily. You'd think the stone would want this kind of power, wouldn't it? Thought Bernardo. Well, the scientists would explain it all.
This time, Bernardo was sure he'd figured out how to use the core safely.
See? He'd trusted his gut, and it had worked out. That's what it meant to be a hero. To ignore the naysayers and the odd-makers, and do what you knew was right, and have it turn out to be the right thing. Well, he wasn't worried. Once he got to the observatory, the scientist toads could explain it. Then he could carry the war into the enemy's camp and destroy them all. Oh dear, he was getting a little bloodthirsty, wasn't he? Bernardo hoped his mother wasn't watching.
Once you try it, you're hooked. Maybe I should follow my nose, thought Renato. Is that a word for a lot of ravens? Like a doofus of ravens? this chest, there were woodcuts of amazingly beautiful vixens wearing no clothes at all. And something more useful.
Bernardo had never felt better in his life. Normally, a battle would wear him down and he would need a night's sleep. Now he felt like he could go all night and all day. He felt like people were cheering him on, and he could practically hear their applause as he slew one raven after another.
The Imperial fleet was closing in on the rebels, forcing them to come out and fight. Bernardo was itching to bring the fight to the enemy. He had to remind himself not to be too reckless. Ooh, wouldn't his gauntlet look swell with that jewel in it? Energy spheres. Easy to dodge, but boy do they sting if you didn't pay attention. was a radiance at the end of a long, dark tunnel. Mother, he thought. Flames really bring out your eyes. Sometimes, at home, he'd wave his sword around for hours. The toads at the observatory measured the stone with their occult devices. I fed it the core of Sky Ripper, explained Renato. No more feed blood and souls.
But the core is not an unlimited energy source,
said one toad. Another said,
there's a feedback loop, you see, which could overload the stone.
The stone doesn't actually feed on souls,
claimed a third.
But on pain of killing another sentient being. If you can truly be at peace with yourself, it would not overload.
This was all very confusing. At peace? Yes, the mountains were peaceful and quiet. But he now had the power to turn the tides. He should report to the Rebellion Council and prepare for the decisive battle. The one thing he understood from all the toad arguments, maybe the stone did not feed on blood or souls or rage. It fed on empathy. It fed on the pain he felt when he put an end to another being's existence. Even if that other being was a raven intent on killing him. If he could find peace, then he could use the power of the Ibla Stone without being taken over by its evil. The mountains. He would go to the mountains. He could find peace there. Unfortunately, the mountains were not empty. There were ravens everywhere. No matter. He had to fight, yes, but he didn't have to be angry. Parry, dodge, slash, and breathe. Yes, focus on the rhythm, the dance of it, not on the blood or the raven's core as they died. Ah, it was working. He wasn't feeling those dark jolts of eldritch energy. He wasn't feeding the Iblis Stone. Serve the Emperor! Cawed the ravens.
Of all the artisans he was creating employment for, truly, he was a job creator. What's behind door number 2? Odd that they never locked these things. The stone was still silent. His mind was his own, and his heart too. He bore them no ill will, these ravens. They were doing their job. They were expressing their nature. Dance, whirl, parry, jab, and breathe. It was all so simple, wasn't it? Something was missing. He didn't feel truly at peace. Wait. Wasn't this near where Calaveras lived? The sage would help him figure it all out. That had gone rather well, actually. Made him a little nervous. Like a fly at the other end you couldn't see. ready to become faster, stronger, bolder. If only he could figure out which.
This is quite the view, he thought. As for the gate, well, he could take her. The Iblis Stone, silenced by the Skyripper's core, had given Reynardo enough power to challenge the Imperial fleet. But what Reynardo was seeking was inner peace. The rebellion was on the verge of extinction, but it would have to wait. At the end of the mountain path, he found the wise Calaveras in his workshop. "Do you fix souls or only artifacts?" he asked the sage.
Does your soul need fixing?
Asked the sage. "I've been killing a lot of ravens lately," he told the sage.
You're a fox,
said Calaveras.
To kill birds is part of your nature. Take joy in it. I mean, I might as well worry about eating flies. Would you like a fly?
It was true. That's what he had forgotten. The joy. Now he was ready for the final battle. The Farfarer cut through the clouds. The air had never felt so sweet since he was a child.
There it was, the dreaded Imperial fleet. He could smell wet hemp ropes ahead, wood and tar, and ravens. Even the fleet smelt good, somehow. He was ready.
He was ready.
Reynardo had it all squared away in his head.
He would kill the Emperor. Isengrim III had begun well, but he had gone mad. He was trying to invoke the lost gods by means of dark, blasphemous rituals. That was a secret, but the victims had spoken to Reynardo. The ghosts had spoken. No anger. Reynardo could not afford anger. It was empowering the crystal in his sword. That made him stronger, but it clouded his mind. He would not be a hero. A hero strives. Reynardo would just be one with everything. The Emperor would die, and the wheel would turn, and all would be restored without rancor, without sorrow, without pain.
Mikado had once invested in a jewel store, but it lost money because someone kept robbing it. Twist, it was him.
But the more he thought about it, and he had so much more time to think about it now that he was not worrying about the battle, killing the Emperor would not change anything. Another would take his place. Perhaps Zenobia. Perhaps the Speaker of the Rebel Council, and power would corrupt them too, and death would make grief, and grief would lead to hatred. He must lead by example. Reject the violence. Reject the desire to create violence. But how?
This was definitely better than pulling yourself up in a bucket. Soon he'd confront the Emperor. Funny that this whole war had come about because the Emperor feared death. And now it was coming for him. There was some sort of lesson there, wasn't there? Finally, he came to the Emperor's ship. The path behind him was strewn with dead ravens. The path to enlightenment. His mistake, he realized, was trying to change the world. The world would spin and the wheel would revolve whether he strove against it or not. What he had to do was nothing. He had attained enlightenment. He sat down, adopted a full lotus position, and began to meditate. And all around him, the warriors stopped fighting too. They knew. They could feel his enlightenment. They gave up fighting, dropped their weapons, and became his disciples. No, just kidding. The nearest raven stabbed him with a sword and then chopped off his head. I might not have thought this through properly.
thought Renado's head as it rolled around the deck and died. But he'd learned another true thing. The Iblis Stone was evil. It would try to corrupt anyone who used it. There would be a way to win. Renado could feel it. He'd have to explore choices he'd never made before he could figure it all out, though. And with that, the book's pages fluttered to the beginning once again. And he fell. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game-changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renado knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis Stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it. To take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renado had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renado really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Lapino. Apparently, the Mad Rabbit had sold a Pegasus that he did not exactly own. Lapino always wiggled out of trouble, given time. But he was out of time. Lapino's frantic message said that the Ravens were going to kill him for being a rebel spy. And that he had a clever plan. If the fleet reached him first, they'd string him up for that. Never mind the winged horse. Or so Lapino had told him over the far speaker anyway. Lapino had apparently managed to confuse the judge by arguing that he hadn't actually stolen a winged horse. He'd only sold it. But wait, where was the prison? The village was empty. Had everybody fled the Ravens? was odd. Ronaldo had been here, at this exact place, at this exact time. But this time, there were so many more ravens. Ronaldo thought of the Iblis stone and shivered. He had no business messing with ancient, cruel artifacts. What he needed was his friends around him. Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose.
Right, who wants to die first?
Ooh, sparkly, thought Ronaldo. It was time for a little exploration. He was practically sure he'd find something useful in one of these things. Cool. Wish I could do that. This chest was really awesome. See what I did there? Ravens were landing everywhere. The advance guard. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lupino first, they'd eat him for breakfast. Or a snack. Ravens weren't picky. If they got hungry, they sometimes forgot to interrogate their prisoners. Even top spies like Lapino.
Well, unless he really was a traitor, obviously. Then they'd probably pin a medal on his chest.
Dirty and bloody, Renato finally reached Lapino. The rabbit was practicing his shuffle. Renato recognized the cards. It was Lapino's favorite deck.
Oh, I thought you were in danger. I am. The ravens are coming. Oh, the prison thing. Right, yeah, see, this guard owed me 53 ducats, so we made a deal. They're very reasonable people, actually, for weasels. Now, I got a brilliant plan to kidnap Zenobia.
We capture Zenobia, we find out what she knows, and that's the whole war right there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
Capture the Emperor's greatest general, who also happened to be a deadly sorcerer and, oh, his only daughter? That would be worth it. On the other hand, he could still get to the core of the Sky Ripper, even if he couldn't get the whole thing. It must have great power. To make the Sky Ripper, the Transcendent Emperor had wrapped an armature around the eye of a god. Renato had already let that armature slip away to save Lapino's life. But even its core, the eye torn from a god, surely they could fashion a great weapon from that.
The core of the Sky Ripper? Lapino's excited. That's an actual thing that we could just go and get. You've been busy.
He sure had. Renato told him all the things he'd been up to. Soon they got to talking about old times, about wages they'd won and lost, and scrapes they'd barely got out of. It was good to be back with his friend. True, the core was capable of terrible, uncontrollable destruction. But this time, he was sure it would work great. It's beautiful here, thought Renato. It was nice to be back with his old war buddy. All right. Lapino was a traitor. But still, it was good company. Had the Transcendent Emperor actually called his weapon the Sky Ripper? Seemed a bit grandiose, didn't it?
You never knew where the road would take you, thought Renato. The right jewel could really give you an edge. The wrong, well, it still looked pretty, didn't it? Renato had been the terror of the sandcastles when he was 2.
You almost never saw wild gogglers together like this. The toads had to train them not to peck each other to death. So these had to be imperial gogglers. That meant ravens were up ahead. Renato felt wrong all over. He could feel an almost palpable sickness in the air. And if the land could have tumors, they would look like these monstrous crystals. The forest was quieter than it had been. There were insects, but few birds, if you didn't count the ravens. Renato smelled sick animals and dying ones, but no healthy ones. And getting a bad feeling about this, Renato thought. Maybe Lupino was right. Maybe they should have kidnapped Zenobia instead of coming here.
It looked like they'd forgotten to turn off their flamethrower.
As he held the radiant icosahedron, Renato felt queasy, like dozens of tiny worms were nibbling his insides. It wasn't healthy to be so close to the eye of a god. How could he use it? He could take it to the observatory. The scientists there could tell him how to harness its ancient power. But honestly, Renato ached to get away from it. He brought the core back with him to the Farfarer. But honestly, Renato ached to be rid of it.
Tell you what, said Lupino. I'll take it to the observatory. You attack the Imperial outpost.
The Imperial outpost was a vital communications node. Taking it could shatter the Empire's ability to coordinate. And it would be full of secret plans and maps and maybe even rebel prisoners. It was a good target for a hero like Renato. But what if Lupino lost the core to the Empire? That could be a good thing, couldn't it? Was Renato ready to take that risk? Maybe it was better if he brought the core to the scientists himself.
Trust me, Renato, you won't regret this. I'll treat the core like it was my own baby daughter.
As the Farfarer dived towards the Nexus, Lupino was jumping up and down with excitement. "Stop rabbiting around," Renato said. Lupino just stared at him. The moment the ship landed, Lupino leapt off the ship. As Lupino vanished into the wilds of the Nexus, Renato vaguely remembered Lupino had a baby daughter, didn't he? And he told her mother he was going out to get some Easter eggs, and he'd never come back. But Renato was relieved not to carry the core anymore.
He was already feeling better. And who knows, maybe this time Lupino would get it right. And if Renato could take the outpost, he'd have access to all the Empire's communications in the sector. Right?
What are you guys dressed up as for Halloween? Just wondering.
Renato had heard stories of a dungeon where chests were filled with potions and weapons. Fairy tales. Gem of power. Ooh, you didn't find those every day. Renato caught his breath. His joints still hurt, but he couldn't feel the poison in his system anymore. He'd let the armature slip out of his hands to save his friend Lupino. Of course he had to let Lupino take the core. The rebellion needed every man doing his duty. And the rabbit would be no good taking on an Imperial outpost, right? People had laughed at the government workbench placement program. But you could see the benefits everywhere. Renato took the outpost with a song in his heart. Soon, he was stuffing his sack with key messages from and to the fleet. Then the far speaker toad chortled a new message. The observatory had been sacked by ravens. Lupino and all the scientists had been taken to the mountains. Why? Why had he trusted Lupino again? And now the Empire had the core. Renato hailed the rebel base to warn them. but their far speaker didn't crouch back. Was the base under attack too? Who knew what was going on at the base? But he knew what the Ravens would do to Lapino if Renato didn't rescue him fast.
Well, actually, he wasn't exactly sure. It kind of depended on whether Lapino was a traitor or not. Renato just couldn't bring himself to believe that.
What are old friends for, if not to need rescuing every few days? Renato felt a twinge of doubt. Should he have gone to the base? No. Logically, wherever they'd taken Lapino was probably where they took the core, right? Oh, why couldn't Lapino have just, for once, not got himself captured? Was that too much to ask? He shouldn't be too hard on the rabbit. No, he meant well, and he was insanely brave. You had to admire that.
Well, they really needed to redecorate anyway. Renato had always wanted a flying carpet. This was more like a flying tabletop, but it would do.
Where were they holding Lapino anyway? There was no sign of him or the Ravens who'd captured him. Just rocks and snow and the usual scouts. No sign of the core either. Was this a wild rabbit chase? Oh, trust Lapino to screw up even getting captured.
But what was this rebellion for anyway?
Lapino was a useless goof, but he was a friend. If friends didn't matter anymore, what was the point of winning this war? Suck your eyeballs! Cawed the lead raven. Thank you, I think, said Renato. It never hurt to be polite.
A doctor once told Renato that fruit was a placebo. But he felt better, and that was what was important. Thought about the intel he'd gathered from the outpost. Who would he bring it to? Who even had time to read it? Truth was, Renato really liked the sound his sword made in the air. At the end of the mountain path, Renato came to a clearing. There was a campfire, raven feathers, and... oh, Lupino's lucky deck of cards. Well, that wasn't good. Renato hoped Lupino had not tried to cheat his captors at cards. Ravens were much better than weasels at counting, and they had a very poor sense of humor. Then, he saw what he had hoped never to see. Fresh scraps of rabbit fur. Ragged and bloody, ravens would eat anything.
By Grabthar's hammer! Renato screamed at the sky. I will avenge you!
The rebels had assembled their fleet. Ahead, the clouds were dark with Imperial ships. If he could reach the Emperor before the rest of the rebels did, maybe he could settle this without too much bloodshed. He set sail, and the Farfarer shot forward. Poor Lupino had never been a great warrior. The mad rabbit was good for a lark and a laugh, and a pint. The thought of ravens eating him made Renato furious. The way they were eating up the land. The way the Emperor was eating up the people with his new, bloodthirsty ways. He would make them all pay.
The mysterious sword from the east made you so fast you could catch a fly with your chopsticks. If that's what you really wanted. This jewel was more than sparkly. It had arcane power and an engraving. To Cindy? He had given up every objective to save his friend. He had given up the armature, the core, the gem, and even Zenobia. He loved Lupino, he realized. And now the rabbit was gone. A hero looks out for his friends, even when they're gone. He would send Lupino an honor guard of ravens to serve him in the halls of the Valiant. He would avenge him.
Smell any better dead, Renato thought.
Clean up around here, he thought. Finally, he reached the Emperor's ship. And there was Lupino, surrounded by ravens. He was alive! They'd eaten some other rabbit. "I'll save you!" he shouted with joy and flung himself at the ravens. "Aw, you shouldn't have," said Lupino when the last raven was down. Renato threw his arms around his best friend. "I had to come. I love you, man. You really, really shouldn't have, said Lupino. And Renato felt a rather sharp pain in his back. As he collapsed, Lupino took the dagger out of Renato's back and wiped it off on Renato's sleeve. Why? You always have to be the hero. Brave Renato, epic Renato, super sexy Renato, and I'm sick of it.
As Renato died, all he could think was,
Damn it. Fooled again.
He should go back to some of the choices he'd faced before. Maybe there were new paths that had opened up, like those doors he was opening up all over the map that took him to new treasures and around his enemies. And he hadn't learned anything new this time. He'd done the same thing twice, yet expected a different outcome. The book's pages fluttered to the beginning once again. Faster than before, and he fell. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game-changer.
pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lupino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Every child knew about the Sky Ripper. The Transcendent Emperor had buried its pieces deep. And then, this Emperor's horrific sacrifices had brought it back to the surface. Renato wasn't exactly sure how to use the legendary weapon. But surely, there must be some way to do it without provoking another catastrophe.
Had he, somehow, summoned the long-lost components of the legendary weapon out of the deep places of the Earth? It was more than Renato could fathom. But if he could find a legendary weapon, he would use it.
As he set foot on the island, Renato couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Was Lupino still waiting to be rescued? No. He was probably drinking champagne with the ravens. Did ravens drink champagne? Did rabbits? Renato felt oddly thirsty, come to think of it.
Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? Renato never made plans that required constant vigilance. He was a hero. He didn't think too much. He just went with his gut and hoped it all worked out. The Sky Ripper was a long shot. He'd have to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it?
This chest had teaspoons stolen from every inn in Boreas. Oh, and something more useful.
Ooh, a workbench. Did he have any jewels he hadn't tried out?
He had.
Didn't your mother tell you it's rude to stare? Snapped Renato, a little smug.
That had been his mistake before, thinking he could win a battle of wills with an ancient evil all by himself. He had to be cleverer than that. Or braver. Or something. Or I could go that way, he thought. See? That wasn't so hard. There it was. Sky Ripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway. The device was intricate. No one alive had the skill to make a thing like it. How was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Sky Ripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. Renato asked himself why he changed course to confront Zenobia. He'd no idea. Sometimes he would just do things, and he could never figure out why he'd done them. Usually, they worked out. After all, he was a hero. The truth is, though, he wanted to see her, wasn't it? It had been a dozen years since Swordfu School. He'd followed every rumor about her, every scrap of news. Not that he still loved her. After all, she was his enemy. No, it was solely because know your enemy. But it would be great to see her, even if they faced off across sword points, as they'd done so many times at school. The world was a less interesting place without her. When Renato went to the china shop, for some reason the owner was always nervous. Firewalls only let you through if they think you're hot enough. He couldn't do worse with Zenobia than he'd done with the core, could he? Well, the eyes have had it. Reynardo wasn't entirely sure how he was going to capture Zenobia. She'd be expecting him. And he didn't have Lapino to cook up a clever plan. Why was it again that he hadn't got the core?
Maybe because the results tended to be disastrous.
These streets were familiar. The Swordfu School was closed now, but he had been down that street 1,000 times. He knew that pub. He knew that alley. He knew the alley behind it much too well. No wonder Zenobia had chosen to invade this island herself.
Boy, someone has spent a lot of money for a graduation present.
Do old ravens go grey? You know what? Don't worry about it.
Reynardo slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. Where were her guards? Finally, he reached her bedroom. She was curled up on her bed. Oh, he'd forgotten how beautiful she was. How sleek. How soft. He tapped her on the shoulder with his sword. She vanished. And he suddenly noticed he couldn't move except his mouth. In fact, soon he couldn't keep his mouth shut. He told Zenobia everything. Skyripper, the Iblistone, even where the secret rebel base was, until he was hoarse. It was some kind of truth spell. A talky truth spell. She called her father by Farspeaker Toad and filled His Majesty in.
But why didn't he get the core?
Croaked the Farspeaker in something like His Majesty's croak. Because I missed you, darling. Reynardo grinned.
He doesn't even know why.
Frowned Zenobia.
That makes no sense. It's a trap.
Shouted the Emperor.
I'll meet you at the outpost, and I'll bring my interrogators.
If Reynardo came face to face with the Emperor, maybe he could assassinate him. But maybe it would be smarter and safer to turn Zenobia against her father.
What are you doing?
Asked Zenobia. Did you ever wonder why the Emperor adopted you? He asked her. She shook her head. He told her. His Majesty wanted to bring the lost gods back. They could make him an eater of souls, an immortal. But to seal his bargain with them, he needed a sacrifice. Someone who truly loved him. She was stunned. Furious.
You're lying.
Under a truth spell? It's a trick. You can't prove that. Take me to the observatory, and I will. What kind of proof could you possibly have? She said as they landed on the Nexus. Your father ritually sacrificed a village, and he left witnesses? The scientist resurrected one. Well, it's not really alive, but it can talk. A true witness. She frowned. The dead can't lie. Well, I bet they could. They just don't have any reason to. She nodded grimly. You go on ahead. I don't want the Ravens to see me.
Take a leap of faith, said the inscription. Ice walls only let you through if they knew you were cool.
The lead, Raven.
Who leaves these chests everywhere? Wondered Renato. I should send him a thank you note.
caught up with him. Don't you think I'd know if my father wanted to invoke the Lost Gods? Would he tell you? No. Would you help him? No. I'd burn his books. Why'd he adopt a stray cat? You don't ask a thing like that. No, not when there's no good answer, she said, her whiskers twitching.
The scientists at the observatory had a true witness to one of the Emperor's blasphemous rituals. The dead could be made to speak for a short while. Interestingly, they could not be made to lie. After all, what do they have to lose or gain by lying? A very clever engineer named Elon Muskrat got his start making floating platforms. Not many people knew that.
The observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists and black feathers everywhere. The ravens had burned the reanimated witness to cinders. Renato was stunned. There goes my proof. These were scientists, not rebels, Zenobia said, upset. Why would he do this? I don't know. Let's go to the fleet and ask him.
Yes. I'll meet you on the mountains. There's something I have to get first.
But could he afford to meet her in the mountains? He'd given the Empire the location of the secret rebel base. They would need rescuing. Why was he going to meet up with her? Wasn't it more important to rescue the Rebel Council from the almost certain Imperial attack? Why was he in this war anyway? Was it really to fight the good fight, or did he just want to see her again? One of these days, Renato thought, I should really figure out my motives before I pounce. Nah. Was it true? Was he on this adventure just to see Zenobia again? The Imperial heir was not an easy cat to see. Well, she'd ignored all his Kwanzaa gifts. And on the other paw, trying to get a date by joining a war against your intended was, let's say, pretty optimistic. But on the back paw, thought Renato. Yes, it sounded exactly like him. Good. I'm so glad we had this little chat, he told himself.
Oh, what does the fox say?
Asked one raven. Another one called back,
I'm dying.
and they both laughed hysterically.
No skateboarding, the sign said.
There were a lot of dead ravens along the side of the road. Someone had rampaged through here on a killing spree.
What had Zenobia gone to get? He had a chilling feeling it was the Iblis stone. Zenobia was level-headed. The stone could make anyone bloodthirsty. He could tell her style from the blade work on the dead birds. Couldn't they have put in an elevator? Or a giant eagle? Or something? To everything, there is a season. He turned over died. Give me a lever, said Archimedes, and I shall open a gate. Bernardo wondered what he should do when he found Zenobia. What could he do if she had the Iblis stone? He reached the summit, expecting no one. But there she was, steaming, pacing.
I'm gonna kill him, she said. I'm gonna kill all his ravens, and then him, and then his family, and all their eggs and tadpoles. And then I'm gonna burn down their pond.
Did you go and get the Iblis stone?
Do you see all these ravens I killed? So much power.
Yeah. Great, Bernardo said.
You really want power from a demonic rock?
You want the stone, don't you?
Not really.
Good. I'd rather not have to kill you.
He told her he loved her, that he wouldn't let the Iblis stone take her, even if he had to die for it. Well, he planned to tell her. Now didn't seem like the right time. She'd probably cool off in a bit. So he let her get in her ship and fly off.
He rushed back to the Farfarer and followed her, keeping a healthy distance.
Zenobia's ship was just visible through the clouds ahead. How could he reason with her? But he had to. The rebels were down for the count. No wonder. He'd betrayed the location of their base, and then he'd abandoned them. And if she became Empress while she was in the grip of the Iblis stone, if she became Empress by murdering her father, she could still be a great Empress. But she could also be a nightmare Empress.
She had to be stopped.
There were more dead ravens along his path, some of them wounded in the back. He knew she could have easily talked her way past them, or clouded the little tiny raven brains with a spell. She was going out of her way to kill everything in her path. This wasn't Zenobia, not as he knew her.
This one contained nothing but unmatched gloves. And something more useful. there was an engraving. Maximum capacity, 130 people.
So, his beloved was possessed by the spirit of a demon. That's what it meant to be a hero. To brave the darkness in your loved one's soul. To have faith there was doing good in her. To help her out of that darkness, no matter what the cost. But what? What could he do? She'd kill him if he tried to take the Iblis stone from her. At the end of the trail of raven corpses was Zenobia. Her father was frantically rigging a strange apparatus wrapped around a glowing core.
Don't do it, he shouted. You'll hate yourself in the morning. Stay back, she screamed in a horrible voice he'd never heard before.
It froze him in his tracks. The Emperor stared at him.
Run,
He told the toad,
or hop.
but he didn't manage to voice it, only think it. Zenobia stabbed her blade forward, and His Majesty fell dead. She began laughing hysterically. Or was she weeping? Just walk away, she laughed at him. I've no more use for you. There was something he needed to do, but he couldn't figure out what it was. So he did as he was told. As he walked away, he felt a chill in the world. The light in the sky seemed to dim. He didn't dare turn. He had a nagging feeling there was something he should have done just then. Something heroic. But he could not have taken the Iblis stone from her by force. And she would not have parted with it willingly. A cold wind blew from where she had been. But he still didn't dare turn. And then, an awful laughter filled the air. And all the torches and all the ships went out. And he realized what he should have done. But by then, it was too late to do anything.
He should go back to some of the choices he'd faced before. Maybe there were new paths that had opened up, like those doors he was opening up all over the map that took him to new treasures and around his enemies. But he'd learned another true thing. Zenobia still had feelings for him. The book's pages fluttered to the beginning once again. Faster than before, and he fell. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. Renato finally realized that Lapino was a traitor to the cause, and maybe Renato could use that somehow. Renato couldn't quite put his paw on when he'd realized Lapino was working for the Empire. He'd never exactly seen Lapino sending coded messages to the palace, but he was sure. The rabbit had been on too many disastrous missions where he was the only survivor, or where he accidentally missed getting on the boat that went down to the abyss in flames. If Renato could prevent Lapino from getting back to the fleet with all the intelligence he'd probably gathered, it might be worth the trip. How had they come to this? They'd been on so many adventures together. Lapino had talked Renato out of prison at least 4 times, and Renato had rescued Lapino from at least 2 lynch mobs.
but he'd always felt that the rabbit resented him. Peppino was hilarious because he was so down on himself and everyone else. But behind the laughs, he wasn't a happy camper. Ooh, was this payback? Or did the Empire have his little white tail in a vice?
Nice. That could be useful.
Kill the rebel! Caught one, Raven. Eat the rebel! Caught another.
To Earth. Renato told the corpses. It was something he'd seen in a play once.
Peppino would betray him. The core was dangerous. Now, Renato had a fleeting idea that the two ideas went together somehow. And then it was gone again. Ah, damn ideas. They never stuck around when you needed them.
I wonder what happens if I go that way. and exhausted, Renato finally reached Lapino. The rabbit was practicing shuffling his favorite deck. Now that he knew what the rabbit was, there were a few things about him that Renato didn't find so amusing anymore. You sent me an urgent message saying that you're in danger. Oh, I am. The ravens are coming. Now, I got a clever plan to kidnap Zenobia. Renato wanted to clap shackles on the rabbit and shout, "You're a traitor, and I'm not falling for it." But if there was one thing Renato was sure of, it was that the core of the Sky Ripper was dangerous mostly to its user. If he could put it in the Emperor's hands, old Isengrim III might blow himself and his fleet up with it. Yes, that was it. Renato felt like a real hero, brave and smart. He told the rabbit all about the Sky Ripper's God's Eye core.
I'll go get the core while you attack Zenobia.
He told the rabbit.
Oh, wait, I've an even better idea. I'll get the core and you attack Zenobia,
Said the rabbit.
Right, yeah, that is better.
Agreed Renato. Perfect. The traitor would make sure the Emperor got the core. Now Renato just needed the Emperor to use the core. If he could only get something that the Emperor wanted very badly. Zenobia. He could save her and bait the Emperor at the same time. Right. Now, all Renato had to do was fight his way through Zenobia's invading troops, sneak onto her ship and into her bedroom, and kidnap her without any of her dozens of guards alerting her.
Then he would rely on her love for him to convince her how evil her father was, so she'd run away with him instead of going back to her father, who was going to blow himself up.
It did sound a little risky. But Renato had a feeling it would work out somehow. It always did. Once, Renato had opened a chest, and a Jack-in-the-Box jumped out. Jack-in-the-Boxes, they gave him the Wiggins. That's my order, thought Renato. He was such a wit.
Hero wall, hero sword, firewall, fire extinguisher. He hadn't noticed that path before. Bernardo was halfway to Zenobia's encampment when Lapino showed up. He was disheveled and distraught.
They jumped us. I barely got away. Oh, they got the core.
Oh, it was all going according to plan, thought Bernardo. Now he just needed Zenobia on his side. Yes, that was even better. The Iblis Stone. Zenobia could get it. And then the Emperor would have to pursue them. Wait. No. The gem would corrupt anyone. Even her. That's it, he thought. Even Lapino. Even though Lapino was already a traitor. It would turn him against his secret master, the Emperor. He would try to make himself Emperor. And the Emperor would have to defend himself with the core. Boom. He was a super genius. This is terrible, Bernardo told the rabbit. If only I had gone for the Iblis Stone. But now it's lost in enemy territory. He handed Lapino a map. It gives the bearer so much power. We can only hope the Emperor never finds it.
What was that?
Said Lapino.
I think someone's following us.
I didn't hear anything.
Rabbit ears. You go on ahead. I'll check it out.
And with that, Lapino hopped off with the map. Now he could slice the wings off a fly in the air. Not that he would. It's sort of mean, really. Bernardo slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. She was curled up on her bed.
he'd forgotten how beautiful she was. How sleek, how soft. He tapped her on the shoulder with his sword. She was made of smoke, and he noticed he had a very solid blade to his throat. "Did you really think you could capture me?" purred a familiar voice. "I just wanted to chat," said Renato. "Did you ever wonder why the Emperor adopted you? He needs a sacrifice, someone who truly loves him, to make a bargain with the lost gods." "That's a vicious lie. He wants to bring them back." That's crazy. Why would anyone... They could make him immortal. An eater of souls. And with that, her eyes widened. She understood. Renato told her how he had rescued a priest whose order had been massacred. How he had slept in a burnt village. At midnight, the Emperor's victims had come to him in his dreams to tell him of the hideous eldritch rituals they'd been sacrificed in. He could still see those kittens and puppies. Their wide, sad eyes, their moist noses. "You can't prove that." "I've got a witness at the observatory." He couldn't tell her, not yet, why he was really here. He didn't want her to be anywhere near the fleet when her father blew himself and Lupino up. So he told her about how the Emperor's obscene rituals had raised ancient artifacts out of the land. How he'd followed the appalling trail of the hideous horrors His Majesty had perpetrated for the sake of his own immortality. "Any of this ring a bell?" he said. "He told me it was all lies." "You've always known when I was lying. I always hated that about you," said Renato. The rebellion had started after atrocities that the Empire hushed up. Renato had rescued a priest whose order had been massacred for one book. He had slept in a burnt village. Dead kittens and puppies had come to tell him what the Emperor had done to them. Don't you think I'd know if my father started practicing black magic? Why? Would you join in? No! I'd destroy his books and I'd... Oh, God. Okay, you're not completely wrong. They've resurrected one of his victims. Well, look, it's not exactly alive, but it can talk. A true witness, she said. Renato wondered what would happen if he jumped. Would he be rescued by an emergency platform?
magical energy balls, immune to the laws of gravity.
Good on you!
The observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists and black feathers everywhere. The Ravens had taken special care to burn the reanimated witness to cinders. Zenobia stared at the carnage.
He didn't want me to hear the witness, did he?
I guess not.
What's your plan?
She asked.
So, Renato explained his brilliant gambit. Sending Lapino to get the Iblis Stone, become super powerful and corrupted, provoke the Emperor into using the core against him, thus blowing up both of them, and hopefully the fleet too.
Let me visit your council, she said, shaken.
I want to help.
Could he really trust her?